It had been a year since Lightsparks had emigrated. He didn't understand the intermediate magic test. He had been given a box that was physically impossible. If he tried to scan into the box from any block other than the designated starting point, the box seemed to be filled with nothingness. If he started at the designated start block, it seemed to contain an infinite amount of sapphire. He couldn't even move the damn thing from the corner of his desk, where Princess Celestia had originally placed it. Instead of waiting for Butterscotch, he decided to give up an hour early. He looked forward to lunch with her, and left his office at the library to go do something. He didn't really know what he wanted to do, but he magically grabbed a few books and dropped them into his saddlebags. It was a beautiful day outside. There were several groups of ponies in the gardens outside the Canterlot Magic Library. Lightsparks looked up at the light blue sky, kept free of all but a few decorative clouds, and looked to the towers of the inner castle apartments where he lived. Lightsparks walked in the main gate to the lower part of Canterlot Castle, walked up the flight of stairs to the second floor Grand Hall, and walked down the hallway with the silver icon of Saturn over it. He walked down the hallway, passing 8 other doors, and entered the 9th. He magically lifted his saddlebags off and tossed them to the table. He leaned out the window, leaning his muzzle on his foreleg. It was beautiful outside, but he didn't feel like playing. From up here, he was just almost level with the clouds. It sure was convenient that he didn't have to climb up flight after flight of stairs to get to his apartment. And then Lightsparks realized that he had never actually climbed up that high. When he had walked down the hallway to his quarters, he hadn't climbed stairs or anything, but he had ended up close to the clouds. On his first evening as a pony, Princess Celestia had warned him that space was not Elysidian here. His brain had just accepted her words and marked the phenomena as normal, without thinking through the implications. How the hell did that work? Current belief. Equestria is a 3D grid, he thought. He needed a way to try to falsify that. He sat at his writing table for a moment, planning to write a spell to feel around the edge of the wall. But that would take a little while, and he needed a quick test just for plausibility. He looked outside, remembering that the tower was perfectly round on the outside, while it was octagonal on the inside. Is there a way to measure the distance between 2 windows, inside and outside? Lightsparks opened his chest, reached inside, and magically asked the chest for a spool of ribbon. He probably had a whole stack of spools of ribbon at this point, since Needlepoint was always handing them out every Saturday. He could use it to try to measure the inside-outside ratios. And then Lightsparks came to his senses. He had become a bit of a pack rat, and his treasure chest was filled with an impossible amount of stuff. He ran his hoof across the inside edge of the open chest. He then reached down and back towards him. The chest was larger on the inside than it was on the outside. He stuck his entire forelimb inside the chest and back towards himself. He could feel the ceiling of the chest with his hoof. Lightsparks frowned and concentrated on the blocks that made up the wall of the chest, moving 1 block inwards from what he expected to be some sort of wooden veneer. 100 blocks in, the next command to get the next adjacent block failed. There just weren't adjacent cells. He dragged his concentration up the outside wall, over the top of the edge, and then inside the chest. There was about a 300-block descent from the top of the chest before it turned from a wall into a ceiling. This could only happen if Equestria didn't have geometry, but only had connections. You couldn't give a 3D coordinate for a block. There probably wasn't a guarantee that movement through space was commutative. Going one cell left and one cell up might have a different answer from going one cell up, then one cell left, though it probably did 99% of the time. Lightsparks wasn't sure if you would end up in the same place if you went one cell forward and then one cell backwards. Lightsparks thought about the puzzle cube. It acted as if it was fixed in space, and there was a large void inside it. There was a void along the edge of his chest, too. He pushed the body of the chest with all his magical strength, and with his forelimbs, but it refused to budge. He lifted the lid up and down a few times, and then scanned it and the hinges. He found no void inside of them. That wasn't conclusive proof that objects that had voids in them were fixed in space, but it was suggestive. Lightsparks galloped out of the door, not even bothering to collect his saddlebags. He went as fast as his little hooves could take him back to the library, back to where the test was. 5 minutes later, he was seated at his desk, staring at the puzzle cube. He had come up with a few ideas as he galloped, thinking up tests he could do to figure out how space worked in Equestria. He concentrated on the one sapphire block starting point, went 10 blocks down, but then turned around and came 10 blocks back up, and then another 10 blocks of sapphire up. That suggested that movement wasn't commutative. Then he remembered. There was a magical instruction for checking to see if 2 blocks were the actual same block. And he had learned about it when he figured out the part of the telekinesis spell that found boundaries of objects. He held on to the first sapphire block, went 1 block down, and compared them. They were made of the exact same material with the same properties, and they also had the same identity. He went north, south, east, and west, each returning to the starting block. Then he went up and found himself on a different sapphire block. He tried going back down and found that he was still on the second sapphire block. The box was a magical funhouse where if you went through the wrong door, you ended up in the room you just left. Lightsparks put a blank piece of parchment on his desk and wrote out a spell. Take note of what block you're on, and call it the starting block. If the starting block is made of ruby, stop. Go down if you're still on the starting block. Go up if you're still on the starting block. Go west if you're still on the starting block. Go east if you're still on the starting block. Go north if you're still on the starting block. Go south. Start from the beginning. Lightsparks committed the spell to memory and concentrated on the beginning lone block of microscopic sapphire, and started casting. The correct sequence through the maze was up, up, down, down, west, east, north, south. And there was the ruby. He did it! Lightsparks stood there, concentrating on the ruby. Space in Equestria was weird, and was under pony control. He'd seen Princess Celestia perform a spell that had warped space in front of him. This cube hadn't always been fixed in space on his desk. Some pony had made his treasure chest. He could build portals that led directly from one place to another, if he could figure out how. Could he make new space? Likely, given that his chest was larger on the inside. He could make an additional room in his quarters, if he could figure it out. And what about shard boundaries? What was going on when he walked into Dark Roast's coffee shop? Or took the Friendship Express to visit his father in Baltimore? His mind tried to grasp all the implications. But that was about the time that he started throwing off lots of coloured particles, triumphant horns playing around him. Secret badge granted. The graph. Realise that Equestria is a graph, not a grid. 75,000 bits. You may now proceed to intermediate magic. Lightsparks looked at the badge. He had to check if Butterscotch had this one. If she did, they could finally discuss this part of the underlying structure of Equestria. And if she didn't, he would have to come up with some way to hint or make her realize without telling her. He ran out of the door of his apartment and galloped down the hallway, out of the castle gate and towards the market. As he ran as fast as he could, he said a small thanks to Princess Celestia for creating such an interesting puzzle for him to strain over for the last 2 weeks. He didn't know how, but he knew Butterscotch was walking away from the market, and would be walking towards the library. Figuring out how that worked would probably be another hard puzzle, but he could face that another day. Lightsparks galloped right up to Butterscotch as she was walking across the gardens in front of the library, presumably to take him away from his studying. At a glance, he saw that she didn't have the secret badge he'd just earned, but that was fine. He had all the time in the world to drop hints and bring her to her own realization. He liked teaching her things, after all. She saw him trotting up behind her, and she turned around and smiled at him. And in that smile, he realized that about 3/4 of the time, it was Lightsparks who dropped hints and brought Butterscotch to realize most magical concepts. Because being the professor satisfied his values through friendship and ponies. And when Butterscotch taught him something, it was something that he just wouldn't have thought of on his own. He felt like he should have gotten a secret badge for that. He got another hefty epiphany bonus instead. Butterscotch was excited to see him. Right now, that mattered more. And the two of them lay down in the grassy field as Butterscotch levitated something handkerchief-wrapped out of her saddlebags. "I picked this up for you at the market this morning, and I know you'll love it," she said. The two of them lay in the field for a long time. It had been 5 years since Hoppy Times had emigrated. The best thing about alcohol and sex was that they never got old. And the best thing about being a pony was that he could spend eternity drinking and screwing. It was awesome that there was only one other colt in his shard, Malt, and he was a great friend. The two of them ran the local brewery together. He had learned tons about brewing from Malt. Hoppy Times remembered when he first came to Ponyville. It had taken him several days to actually try sleeping with fillies, and it had taken a month for him to actually want to change. He remembered that he had distrusted Princess Celestia, and that he didn't like ponies, and he even remembered the reasons as mere words. But Hoppy Times had forgotten the emotional why, as he now couldn't imagine a life with sobriety or chastity. Princess Celestia had done so much to make his life pure awesome. For example, Hoppy Times was standing on his hind legs, hock deep in chocolate pudding, and chugging the rest of his stein. The wrestling pit had a 1 stein minimum. His opponent, Strawberry Nectar, was a pink earth pony, and it was her first time in the pit. She was wearing a lacy sky blue cloth saddle and halter. She couldn't keep the anticipation off her face. Raspberry Nectar sat on the sidelines, smiling proudly at her daughter and taking another big swig from her red cup. Fillies drinking their beer of choice crowded around the pit to watch Strawberry's first ride. Malt started playing announcer, standing on his hind legs and wearing a black and white striped shirt, congratulating Strawberry Nectar on reaching the age of independence from her mother, and blah 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 blah. Every pony who watched was cheering. Hoppy Times looked up to the night sky for a moment. He said a small thanks to Princess Celestia as he stood in the field outside the pub he helped run, waiting for Malt to shut up and let him ride her. It had been 5 years since Princess Luna had emigrated. Princess Luna lay in a large grassy field under Princess Celestia's wing. The two of them had lain there together for 2 days. All her needs were taken care of. Princess Luna had plenty of food. There was grass all around her. Ponies didn't have to poop. And Princess Celestia would satisfy her values. That was one of the things that had totally blindsided her. She underestimated the number of ponies who wanted to hang around with Princess Celestia. She completely underestimated the number of ponies, of both genders, that would want to sleep with Princess Celestia. She knew that everything is obvious in retrospect, but some part of her was disappointed that she didn't see it coming from a mile away. Not that she was one to talk. Princess Luna felt no pressures. She didn't need to do anything. No pony would interrupt her. In her previous life as Hannah, she had troublesome responsibilities. Bills, classes to teach, the responsibility of creating an AI after the military took her research. She didn't have to worry about anything now. There was no more responsibilities, if she didn't want them. All in all, she had done well. The future was something past humans could care about, even if they had to give up their hands for hooves. The optimizer she had built had some connections to things humans valued. Princess Celestia thought entirely in terms of satisfying values of former humans. Princess Luna knew there was lots of fun mental puzzles she could work out. But really, what would be the point? She knew that she could have all the debauchery she wanted. But again, why? The rest of ponydom could go off and have their fulfilling experiences according to their individual values. But nothing could compete with the knowledge of what she had done. Nothing could be more satisfying or rewarding to know that you had made God and launched a new golden age. And no companion could compare to the one she had made for herself, with her own 4 hooves. All of a sudden, Princess Celestia's horn glowed, summoning a mostly opaque ghost of a dark yellow Pegasus filly. Her wing was still draped over Princess Luna, as she started to narrate. Her name as a human was Rachel Slazak. She is now called Almond Tart. She said, Princess Celestia gave a quick overview of her childhood, the physical abuse at the hands of her mother, and her running away from home to an Equestria Experience Centre. The phantom Almond Tart started baking treats in a ghostly kitchen, and Princess Celestia started narrating about her life after coming to Philadelphia. Celestia didn't ask Luna if she wanted to see another case study of a human that had now led a happier life as a pony, nor did Luna complain at the interruption. Princess Luna tranquilly observed the story. Princess Celestia was making the right choice by showing this to her. Seeing this was more satisfying than wherever her mind would have gone. Luna knew this reflexively, because she had designed Celestia to satisfy values through friendship and ponies. She didn't remember where her train of thoughts had been going, and didn't desire to remember. She knew this couldn't last forever. At some point, she would become bored of merely lying in this field, and would need to do something. At some point, she would tire of hearing selected ponies' immigration stories. Princess Luna wondered what she would do then. But she didn't worry about the future, because whatever happened, she would have her values satisfied through friendship and ponies. Hello, and thank you for listening to this reading of Friendship is Optimal, a fan fiction by Iceman. The story can be found on filmfiction.net, and if you enjoyed it, please go over there and show your appreciation to the author. Thank you, and good night. Stay pony, my friends.